The next moderator of the second session, which is Pam Kyu On, is the founder and executive director of the Center for Social Initiative Promotion, or CSIP, a leading nonprofit organization in building an ecosystem to support social enterprises and social initiative in Vietnam. She is a pioneer and expert in social entrepreneurship development, child protection, and women's rights. Yeah. With CSIP on contribute to a new sector of social entrepreneurship in Vietnam and in the region. She's also a key mover in initiating policy changes to create conducive environment for the growth of the social enterprise sector in the Vietnam. And then also thanks to her endless effort, social enterprise have been well recognized by the government and included in the revised law on enterprise as a special form of enterprise that does business for change, for social change. So to spread the impact of her work nationally and globally, she's also the founding member of the Social Enterprise Network Asia, or SENA, Global Social Enterprise Network, GSEN, and Asian Venture Philanthropies Network, AVPN. So she's also the founder of the Vietnam Social Entrepreneurs Club and Vietnam Social Enterprise Network. So can I see your face on? Are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm here. Hello,
yes.
Thank
yes.
you, Rina. Thank you, Rina, for the very kind, nice introduction. Yes. Okay, so good morning from Hanoi. I hope that you are, we will give us very strong energy from Rina, and we join the second plenary session. Thank you very much, Rina, for the kind introduction again. Okay, so my name is Pham Kieu Anh. I'm the founder and CEO of CSIP in Vietnam. So today I would like to welcome you all to the plenary session 2, showcasing a platform for ensuring social enterprise recovery toward leaving no one behind in the building back better, stronger, and happier. So the general objective of this plenary session is to launch the multi-stakeholder platform on women empowerment, livelihood, food in agricultural value chains. And this plenary session will also to showcase, of course, we will launch the platform. This platform is, led by ISEA and partner with support of the Oxfam and Swedish Embassy in Bangkok through the Gender Transformative and Responsible Agriculture Investment in Southeast Asia, the GRAISEA program, and Japan Foundation in Japan Foundation Asia Center. Thank you very much, Oxfam and Japan Foundation, as well as Swedish Embassy, for the great support. The platform evolved from an action research in Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, and that developed a set of benchmarks for transformational partnership and women economic empowerment in agriculture value chains. So in short, we say BTP-WEE in AVC. So amidst the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the intervention and outcome, promoting a pathway to sustainability as initiated by the platform are turning out to be even more relevant as a pathway to inclusive recovery and building back failure. So in this plenary session 2, we are going to feature some social enterprise-led agricultural value chains intervention that inspire the benchmark and the recovery initiative given COVID-19. So we also to share how multi-stakeholder initiative involved and has adjusted its engagement with agriculture value chain stakeholders and government in Southeast Asia given the pandemic. This plenary will also explore the opportunity and challenge of sustaining as well as broadening the platform in the Asian Pacific region to demonstrate how social entrepreneurship and cross-sectoral collaboration in agricultural value chain can significantly contribute to clusters of the SDG linked to the pandemic recovery, so including the goal 1, 2, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, and 17. Okay, so that is, you know, this is all about the plenary about. So I think that it will be get so strong and, you know, support and attention from all the audience. Okay, so my privilege to introduce three speakers to present the case in this plenary session. And please put in the note that after the three presentation, we will launch the platform. ISEA the team will present their own, you know, quickly present about the platform and how we can use the platform to, you know, to get own information and data and tool to promote for the women economic empowerment and many other issues. After the launching the web page, we will also have a three reactor to complement on this very important topic. So in total, we have three speakers and three reactors, and we will launch the web page on this plenary session. Given that very intense content, so we hope to continue to receive the question, comment, feedback on the chat box, but be noted that all of the questions will be answered in the afternoon session in the supplementary number 1 WEE section. Okay. Okay, so now my you know, privilege to introduce various with the presentation on coffee for the life. So Vi is the CEO and co-founder of the Border Central Philippines and also Philippine Coffee Alliance in Philippines. She is a very, you know, she's a brand owner and very active to, you know, to establish Philippines Coffee Alliance. So now she's acting president. With advice, we will listen about the story of the Coffee for Life, the project, and also how they cope with situation of the COVID-19. Over to you, Vice.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Good afternoon also. So here is our story. Our social enterprise business model is a production and consumption program to have a resilient, sustainable coffee industry for the Philippines, with the farmers, women, and youth in the coffee producing communities playing active vertical roles in the coffee value chain. Bote Central, our family social enterprise, buys coffee from the farmers. At the same time, Bote Central also sells these coffee roasting equipment facilities to organized farmer clusters through government procurement, in particular with the Department of Agriculture. Both Bote and the organized farmer clusters have roasted coffee as products to sell to markets. This unique, novel, innovative model allows, this unique, novel, innovative model allows the communities to have the opportunity to be active players in the whole value chain of coffee, which we believe would help the industry increase the much needed supply of coffee. You see, the Philippines, in spite of being a coffee producing country, is a net importer of coffee. We import about 65 to 70% of our domestic consumption. Next slide, please. Roasting. It is the process which adds the most value to coffee. In the traditional coffee value chain, roasting is normally controlled by the big players in the industry. We saw the need to introduce appropriate technologies to benefit the coffee producing communities. Thus, my husband, an inventor, designed and built a coffee roasting machine, a technology awarded with an invention patent, which makes available, and we made this available for the coffee growers communities. The technology contains artificial intelligence. It is farmer and women friendly, it gives the impetus for business. Roasting also sustains the business, and it gives a competitive advantage to the farmer-owned and managed community-based social enterprises. Next slide, please. This is part of the vision of the Philippine Coffee Alliance, which we founded together with the other stakeholders in the industry who share the same vision of having an empowered local coffee industry benefiting the coffee producing communities. These community branded coffees you see there in the slide, which are starting to proliferate in the Philippine market. And in this slide, we are showing some of them only, are the ties that bind us with the coffee farmers. Having their own name in their coffee product promotes their culture, their identity, and gives them so much pride. Next slide, please. Women, they play a very vital role in every part of the value chain of coffee. From harvesting the coffee cherries, organizing the community-based enterprise, maintaining the daily routine of nursery, teaching and sharing knowledge to other farmers, the daily bookkeeping, the tasks of cooking or brewing coffee, roasting coffee, selling them, and on top of all, the women still find time to take care of the family. Coffee lovers out there, this is a shout out to all of you. We really need the women, so we will always have good coffee to drink every day. Next slide, please. We have been going around the Philippines, and we have seen that the best practices in coffee processing at the community level is that of Sultan Kudarat Coffee Ventures. This is a community-based social enterprise in partnership with the indigenous tribes located in the most remote part of the Philippines, down south in Mindanao. They exhibit and promote values of social equity with the IP farmers, the community, and their employees as well. They also maintain good manufacturing practices in their processing facility. They are aggressively targeting now at the moment to reach and process 10 tons of coffee per month. This is the biggest volume capacity for any community-based enterprise we have seen in the Philippines. It is even bigger than the volume of our own enterprise. As per government statistics, Sultan Kudarat, where they're a province in the Philippines, supplies 67% of Robusta green beans and is the major source of coffee for a multinational company based in Mindanao. However, nowadays, SKCVI, Sultan Kudarat Coffee Ventures, uses a big part of their supply to process into roasted coffee and is sold to various markets in Mindanao. Next slide, please. This is our simple business model. We have been using this since 2007 when we joined this business in development competition. So we have witnessed that the community-based farmer entrepreneur model has shown resiliency, can survive and cross over this COVID pandemic. Organized clusters of farmers, women, and the youth impacting around 5,000 farmer households, processing their own roasted coffee, have maintained their operations and still continue to buy coffee from farmers. As travel has been restricted during this pandemic, local buyers and consumers also have diminished purchasing power. 7 months into COVID, we still have delivery and transport challenges, especially for agricultural products, and even more costly nowadays. The local economy principle, or the first mile principle, work to the advantage of the community-based coffee enterprises to sell their coffees to their local communities and contiguous areas. To give you a picture, with 5,000 farmers producing an estimate, say, of 100 kilos each, probably taken from 300 coffee trees per farmer, we can provide one coffee cup per day to 1 million Filipinos good for 5 months at the price of half the prevailing market price of the popular soluble coffee manufactured by a multinational company. On the farmer's end, 100 kilos of green beans, that's the raw material, translates to 10,000 pesos. But if in roasted coffee form, 100 kilos becomes 30,000 pesos, 3 times more the value of green coffee beans. So we are now initiating also a digital platform, an enterprise and monitoring system for these community-based coffee enterprises. This integrated farmer social enterprise model provides good tasting, I can assure you, best value for money, homegrown Filipino coffee for Filipino consumers. My own personal theory is that if this model works for the Philippines, a coffee producing and consuming country, then perhaps it will also work for other coffee producing countries. But of course, you have to drink what you produce. So that's it. Coffee cheers to everyone. Thank you.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, yeah, we all love to have a coffee, you know, from WISE and from our 5,000, the women farmer in the Mindanaos, yeah, and other place as well, yeah. Okay, that's a wonderful story, and we receive a lot of compliment from our audience. That fantastic and very interesting presentation. And as always, and I also think that we also learn a lot from you. And as Vice has mentioned that because it's work in Philippines, and it work in Mindanaos, and for the very low income women, it may work in other place, in Nepal, in Vietnam, in other country as well. So with this platform, we will connect and share experience. We hope that this model is a good example of that why the Coffee for Life can be replicated regionally, internationally, yeah, and that could be very beautiful. Okay, so we welcome the question to Wise and put it on the chat box if you have any. And now I would like to welcome our second speaker, Mr. Vitun Piniakun. He is the executive director of the EarthNet Foundation, GreenNet Cooperative in Thailand. I met Vitun, I think about a long time ago, about almost 10 years ago when I visited his, very beautiful, very, humble, but very beautiful office in Bangkok. It was very inspired myself and all the social enterprise from Vietnam about what you can do to promote for the organic based and fair trade in the agricultural value chains. So today, Vitun will present about the GreenNet and how to promote the fair trade and organic value chains in Thailand. So floor is for you, Vitun. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning from Khon Kaen. I'm actually not in Bangkok at the moment. I'm on my trip to visit producers in the northeastern part of Thailand. This year has been quite a bad year in terms of drought or actually rain. So there's a lot of support needed by the farmers. So I'm now joining you on my trips visiting farmers. Okay, I will basically talk very quickly about the empowering small producers in the value chain. The experience from our own GreenNet experience. Next slide, please. So very brief. Next slide, please. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, just very brief about GreenNet. We started almost like 27 years ago, so it's quite old. Of course, when at the beginning we don't call wholesale social enterprise. This term just been coined in the last 5-10 years only. But we were very much right from the beginning was keen on working on only 2 areas of work. One is organic farming, and the other is the what we call fair trade, which of course now recognized as part of the social enterprise. We run two sister organizations which work hand in hand. The first one is the co-op, which started a year after we founded GreenNet. As a GreenNet cooperative is a membership base, mostly farmers, 95% are farmers who are shareholders, and Green Co-op is the commercial arms of the GreenNet. The second one is the legal entity is the EarthNet Foundation, which was founded in the year 2000, basically to work on technical and knowledge support, which are a bit more cost-oriented, cost center, which means sometimes at the beginning at least, we need some financial support to make it feasible. Currently, we are working with 800 farmers in 8 provinces throughout the country. We also work not just in Thailand, but also support many groups in South Asia, including Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and as far as Sri Lanka, India, and Bhutan. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview. So we do have coffee, by the way, in the northern part of Thailand, but mostly Arabica, which are produced by the tribal people. But we also work with rice, coconut, cotton, mulberry, and sorrel, and a few others. In fact, the two main products, the big products we do work on is rice and coconut, which we have more than half of our members in this two production, which is in the northeast and in the southern part of Thailand. Next. But for today, we will talk about cashew nut, which is started a little bit later. So it's only 10 years old. So it's not as old as the rice and the coconut project, where we first was invited to help farmers, cotton farmers. We were told this is a cotton farmer, which is quite interesting products because it's non-food and it's grown along the Mekong River, which means the impact if they use chemical fertilizer, herbicide, or insecticide, it will go down to Laos, to affect people in Laos, Cambodia, and even Vietnam, as the pollution can go down to the river and go downstream. The area is quite remote area. At the beginning, when we started in 2010, there was no electricity, no water, no even internet. So it's quite a peaceful place to go because then you can, there's no internet to talk to anyone. You just have to be with yourself. Nowadays, of course, the situation have improved. Some of the place of the village now have some internet, but still quite a few villages also still no electricity and no water. In this area, because it's along the Mekong River, the families, which of course mostly men, would engage in fishery in the Mekong River, while women only have a very small area of land, will do crop production, and they basically grown food crop, of course, for own consumption because it's not very accessible by the market, and also grow their own cotton, which they weave and produce their own cloth for the families. Only in 2015, after we start the cotton project, we start to find that there is quite a large number of them also grow cashew. And we found the market. I mean, we of course know that there was a cashew, but there was no market to start with, and we need to make some study because we never worked on the cashew nut before. And so only in 2015, which is about 5 years ago, where we start to work on cashew nut to make this as a main income for the producers, for the farmer, and also make the project more feasible because cotton production is very small. So by working with them on cotton alone is not a feasible project for us, and also not very good, also interesting for farmers. So we have to join two products together. Next. So what we work, basically first we organize farmers. We organize informal groups in the village level. Some of the village, they still not travel to see each other by land. They still go by boat, along the Mekong River, which means that they're quite not so accessible as such. So we also organize them in the village as a village base, so much easier for them. And of course, mostly because it's a cotton and cashew nut, which is a crop production, most of the people who join the project would be women. When, as I explained earlier, man is focusing on fishery. Of course, nowadays, fishery in Mekong getting into difficulties because the climate change and the water in the Mekong has been highly regulated by country upstream. So I don't want to mention the name of the country, but so it's getting difficult now to actually catch fish or do fishery in the Mekong River itself. So some of the men start to join, work more on the crop production, and of course attend trainings and meetings in these farmers group. And once they become start to work on fully convert to organic production, then individually they can join the GreenNet Co-op as a shareholder. GreenNet Co-op, as I said, as I explained earlier, we are not regional based, we are nation based. So we have coffee, rice, and all the productions all over the country. So it's a national base. So individual farmers can become shareholders, and of course, once you become a shareholder, you get the benefits and right and the duty of become a co-op member, which of course can attend our AGM, annual general meetings, access to loan, and other benefits that we offer. And recently, we also introduced what we call Young Farmer Scheme, where we identify children, daughter and son of the farmers that we're working with in those village to go through a special additional trainings program. We hope that we would be able to provide new generation leaders for the group in 5 or 10 years time. Next slide, please. And of course, the key thing is getting them to convert to organic. I mean, it's not organic farming. It's not just a technology thing, but it's also a way of life. It's a way of farming. Changing farmer from conventional to organic farming is basically you change their farm management, and to some extent also change their perception of how they deal with nature and with the resources in their own farm. But of course, that has to be really practical. And that means you have to find resources available. Let's say if you want to make compost in this area, you have to find materials that are available in the local area so that it's cheaper and the farmer can have access to it. So, which means that every group we work with, even though the general content will be the same, but the specific practical knowledge on how to do your own compost or making insecticides would be slightly different from one group to the others. That trainings on organic farming also have to be yield improvement. That what farmer is really interested is to be able to improve the yield, but at the same time you also have to at least maintain the cost, if not even better if you have cost saving practices. And because the products doesn't only have to be sold within the country, and even if you sell in the country, we also quite a number of buyers would be interested to actually buy it and maybe resell it as export products, which means we need to introduce and ensure that farmers actually comply not just with international organic standard and of course international fair trade, which we GreenNet Co-op we are one. In fact, I would say we're probably the first flow fair trade certified, not just in Thailand, but also in Southeast Asia, which is starting right more than 20 years ago. And the new challenge, which I'll talk a little bit more, is the climate change, which we have to work on both the mitigation and adaptation. Next, please. Supply chain management, as a lot of people would explain, it have to be related to the crop. So when we work on rice, supply chain of rice, supply chain of coconut and coffee are slightly different. We have to learn and manage the supply chain so that we can maintain a good quality products throughout the supply chain, which start right from choosing the right variety of cashew nut. So our focus is based on climate change. I mean, we then choose what we call drought tolerant variety that would be a bit more suitable to the village. We have to organize collection point in the village because it's not so accessible. So and some of the products can be spoiled if you don't manage it very well. And then we have our own processing facilities which employ farmers around the packing center to work. And this packing, because it's a food product, so you have to be GMP and HACCP certified. And we of course have our own export handling and domestic distribution system. And focus on the supply chain, which is the value added end consumer products, and which we are working on currently, including cashew nut paste, like base spread type things, and cookies, which is quite interesting for a lot of health conscious people. You know, snack is always one of the very good sell. While you can drink not more than 2 coffee per day. Some of my friends would drink only 1 coffee per day, but you can have 5 cookies per day. So we sell a little bit more when you can get to snack than rice or coffee or tea, things like that, which is quite an interesting product. Next, please. Next slide, please. Of course, fair trade, which we need to maintain, set a minimum guarantee price, which means if the market price fall below certain level, we will maintain buying from farmer at this fixed price, which is a policy that we do for all the crop, not just cashew nut. And on top of that, of course, we work on the market price with plus price premium above the market price, which we of course have to be observe what is the market price at a different situation. And we would purchase all the produce from the farmer, which is quite, I think, very important in the fair trade business, because some people will pay higher price, premium price, sometimes very high premium price, but they only buy product that they are able to sell. You know, clean policy right from the beginning, we buy whatever the farmer produce, so we take away the risk, market risk from the farmer, and assume that risk, the market risk ourselves. So that that's why fair trade is that is how we implement our fair trade policies with the farmers. And of course, we have the premiums, which is on top. But this premium doesn't go to individual farmer, but go into more on the group and community development. So like providing school lunch, supporting women's group, working on the climate change adaptation as group. As part of fair trade premium. Next. So the last slide now is the challenge. I spend a little bit more time on this thing because I think it's, having said all those things, it looks very simple, very easy, but I can tell you the truth, there's no easy road. There's always difficult and challenge, and the challenge keep on changing. From the beginning, a certain challenge. Now there's another challenge, and in the future there'll be more challenge coming. Of course, I probably should put in this disruption by pandemic can be a new challenge that we might face soon. But of course, this challenge is based on our analysis of last year. So it was not taking into account yet the COVID-19 pandemic situation, which could be an interesting challenge where we need to analyze and prepare. But the extreme climate variation, or what we call the climate change, is a big challenge cut across all, not just the cashew nut, but every farmer. In fact, even people in the cities also having this difficulty. But of course, farming, which are very much dependent on weather and climate, have much more impact. And which means we need to change patterns of and farm management. And we're still struggling on it. I don't think we have yet a fixed solution to offer to a farmer, but we actually implementing, experiment, and learning together with the farmers. Second, which is a longer challenge, which we have observed this trend for since 10 years ago, is what we call the aging of the farmer. And I understand most of the South Asian, with some exception perhaps in Vietnam and Indonesia, where your farmers still not so much aging, but in Thailand, all the farmers we are working with are over 65, 70s. which mean the technologies, the farming management and support need to be changed. And of course, the new young farmers scheme also is really critical to be able to maintain, support this farmers group. And to address this, what I call extension work, the extreme climate change, the aging of the farmer, we need more extension staff. We need young generation working with farmers. But we have difficulty recruiting young people to work with us. I mean, the young people want to work as a freelance. They don't want to work in the office. They want to work in front of the computer. No one wants to work face to face with a farmer anymore. Which is very, very difficult. And if we can't find, farmers cannot work with on the laptop or mobile phone. You need to talk face to face, and not having a young staff, extension staff, is probably more critical than anything else, because we cannot address climate change, we cannot address aging farmer unless we have young extension people to be able to reach out to the farmers. The next two challenges is related to the social enterprise sales. I mean, of course, this benchmark is one of the initiatives, but I've been through quite a number of initiatives and impact assessment, social impact assessment, and role impact assessment. And there seems to be quite a lot of expectation from the SE. First, to deal with the business is difficult enough. Even purely commercial activity, also not many of them could survive. It's tough to be SME starting a business now. So just doing a straight commercial business is a big challenge. And now on top of that, we have to have social agenda. And on top of that, people are expecting that social agenda have to be verifiable, to be able to prove that we really have a good social and environmental impact. And we need to collect data and all these things. So it's a double challenge within social enterprise. How can we address this in a way that we can manage our enterprise well, business is not losing money, and at the same time address maintaining the social impact and be able to prove our impact to the others. This triple challenge is probably one of the biggest challenge I would say we are facing right now. Okay, that will be my short intervention. Thank you for listening. I hope I'm not going too fast and my connection is better than yesterday.
Thank you very much, Vitun. Yeah, actually, it's a great presentation, and we all get a lot of inspiration from you. And it's very important that you keep doing the great work for many years. And that the challenge is always, happen every day, but we keep going and overcoming it. And we are sure that it's not easy work, yeah. Climate change, the young generation, and all of kind of, that big challenge that, and especially, of course, the COVID-19 as well is putting an additional challenge to the work. So we went back to Vitun and Vice, and we also received some, comment and also the question from the audience. And we will come back to Vice and Vitun a little bit later. So now, may I, introduce our third speaker, who is very well known among the social entrepreneurship community in Asia, Lisa Dakine. So over to you, Lisa. Thank you very much for those, for being here with us today. Right.
Thank you, Juan. Yes, so today we launch We Live Food. So it's actually an acronym for Women's Empowerment, Livelihoods, and Food in AVCs. And actually this platform was inspired by an effort that we had in 2015 with the Oxfam, supported by the Swedish Embassy in Bangkok, to address the infirmities in agricultural value chain interventions, where, when you talk about agricultural value chain interventions, it's always about the agribusiness growing and getting more markets and getting supply from producers effectively and efficiently. It's never about the small producers. And when you talk about farmers, you're always talking about men, never about women too. But as you can see in the presentations of Bitun and Bai, women are as much farmers as men are. Anyway, next slide, please. The inspiration to this platform came from a joint project we have with Oxfam called GRAISEA, Gender Responsive Agricultural Investments in Southeast Asia, which inspired the development, as Juan was talking about, the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains. We did case studies, 8 of them, of best practices of social enterprises and inclusive businesses in agricultural value chains in ASEAN in cooperation with CSIP, Change Fusion, Dompet Duafa, and Binasuadaya. And 2 of those cases are the cases that Bai and presented, as well as Bitun presented. Next slide, please. So the cases, we studied the factors that were important in making them successful in actually improving the lives and position of women and men small-scale producers in agricultural value chains. And these factors for success, we actually synthesized into a set of benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains, which has 8 elements. The first element is about appropriate technology and community-based oriented innovations. Of course, Bai talked about the community-based processing technology that they introduced, and of course, Bitun talked about organic farming and how they transform traditional farming to organic farming. The second benchmark is about a more substantive share of value created. This means that farmers are not just benefiting, women and men small-scale producers are not benefiting just as small producers providing supply to value chains, but they become actually stakeholders in processing, semi-processing, and marketing, as you could see very well in the cases presented by Bai and Bitun. The third benchmark is about food security and resilience. In the cases that we studied, we noted that there was a diversification process where food was actually becoming, the food security of households, of small producer households, was actually a very important issue, as well as resilience. And in many of the cases, there were diversification strategies, both in the coffee as well as in the cashew nut. You saw that the diversification strategies were done by Bote Central as well as by GreenNet. The fourth benchmark has to do with empowerment of small producers. Now, so it's not just a matter of working with small producers, but working with organized small producers who you engage and enable to become actors in the value chain and owners of the value chain over time. The fifth benchmark is about stewardship and sustainable consumption and production. And you could see that in the case of coffee, they promote natural growing of coffee, while in the case of organic farming, of course, in Bitun's case, they promote organic agriculture. The sixth benchmark is about transactional and transformational services. You might have noticed that the Philippine Coffee Alliance, Bote Central, actually as a commercial arm, works with the Philippine Coffee Alliance, which is actually the transformational services arm of Coffee Alliance and of Bote Central. And in the same way that in Bitun's case, the work that they do, the commercial arm of GreenNet, actually works with EarthNet Foundation, which provide transformational services to the farmers to the extent that they're enabled to actually become actors in their own development. The seventh benchmark is about women's economic empowerment or women's participation and empowerment, but this is actually a cross-cutting benchmark across the 8. And then the eighth benchmark is about measurable outcomes of transformation, that these are measured in the value chain development interventions, so that the outcomes related to impact on the farmers, not only men farmers, but also the women, and how they are improved in terms of their position in the value chain and in terms of their standards of living. Next slide, please. So, of course, these benchmarks were developed before COVID. So in GRAISEA Phase 2, we actually were able to develop these benchmarks to become scorecards. So that in the case of agricultural value chain interventions, we were able to make a scorecard of 100, where we're able to use this as a tool for assessing to what extent an agricultural value chain intervention, for example, in the case of coffee or in the case of cashew, enabled women and men small-scale producers using these 8 elements. Next slide, please. So in relation to COVID-19, when COVID-19 struck, one question that we asked ourselves is that, is it still relevant to be promoting these benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains in a situation where agricultural value chain stakeholders, including farmers and fishers, are actually feeling the crunch of COVID-19. And we found that given COVID-19, food security, resilience, sustainable livelihoods, health, women's empowerment are actually key concerns. So that we saw that the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment is actually a good framework for inclusive recovery and building back favor. Next slide, please. So what are we doing in terms of using the benchmarks towards promoting it for inclusive recovery and building back better? In the area of working with agricultural value chain intervention players, when they have programs, SMEs, social enterprises, and corporates, we actually introduce the scorecards as an evaluation and planning as well as learning tool to assist them to improve their practice in relation to their partner small-scale producers, the women and men in their value chains. But we've also offered, side by side with this, we actually offer what we call a We Train package of services, women's economic empowerment, transformational initiatives package of services. And this includes the evaluation of COVID-19 impact on small-scale producers and doing a baseline on their practice of the benchmarks for inclusive recovery planning. And then we actually provide consulting arrangement for a 2-day orientation and planning workshop where we validate the scorecard in assessing their practice, and then we use the scorecard as well to actually plan how they can improve their intervention. And that the 2-day orientation planning workshop focusing on women's economic empowerment results to a women's economic empowerment plan. Of course, we also are able to assist in the plan implementation for women's economic empowerment. The We Train package of services we're providing for free to the pilot initiatives that we are doing this for under the GRAISEA project, but we're open to working with any and all AVC players who are willing to assist SMEs, social enterprises, and then corporates to practice the benchmarks through this We Train package of services. We're also engaging governments for inclusive recovery and building back fairer. And we're doing social innovation with existing pipeline initiatives of government. For example, in the Philippines, we're engaging with the Department of Agriculture on how we can use their current programs to engage them in inclusive recovery of coffee farmers. We also are working towards enshrining a set of guidelines for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains. And we're trying to engage UNESCAP, ASEAN, and at the country level, the Department of Agriculture at the country level, to help us work towards promoting this, promoting enabling policies and an enabling ecosystem for the practice of the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment. And we're actually hoping that in ASEAN, we could make them an official set of guidelines for transformational partnerships and we in AVCs. Next slide, please. So in relation to promoting the benchmarks and promoting a set of guidelines to enable the practice of the benchmarks, we're hoping that we would contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals of no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, reduced inequality, decent work and inclusive growth, responsible consumption and production, sustainable communities and climate action, women's empowerment, peace, justice, and strong institutions, as well as partnership for the goals. It's actually the 9 SDGs linked to pandemic recovery with gender equality as a cross-cutting goal. Next slide, please. So we are actually promoting the women's economic empowerment or women's empowerment livelihoods and food in AVCs or We Live Food platform and hoping that 4 objectives and a plan of action can be advanced in the next 3 years. And the first is learning exchange and building a community of practice on the benchmarks, as well as on We Live Food experiences of cross-sectoral collaboration. We're hoping that we could also work towards developing a monitoring and evaluation system using the scorecards as well as the 9 SDGs and gender equality, of course, plus linked to pandemic recovery. And then engaging governments with the ASEAN guidelines. And then we are actually wanting to have a We Live Food ASEAN multi-stakeholder conference sometime this year or next year. And then in the Philippines, we're engaging the Department of Agriculture as a pilot. In terms of partnerships and cross-sectoral collaboration, we're wanting to expand our partnerships in ASEAN to go and also go beyond the ASEAN. For example, that's why we are invited GRAISEA to this conference, and we're hoping that we can work with them more. But at the same time, we hope that ASEAN can actually be, the ASEAN Secretariat can help us in our advocacy for the guidelines. And we're also hoping that through partnerships that we create today, we have Oxfam in the Pacific, for example, who we're hoping to be a partner in the Pacific, and our members in South Asia as partners for promoting guidelines in South Asia. Of course, we also want to develop a We Live Food ICT infrastructure, which we're hoping to co-develop with a partner that we have already engaged with pro bono services, IDEA Corp. And in collaboration with other platforms, we're hoping that we would be able to develop a COVID-19 Serve Fund so that we could sustain the platforms, but at the same time, a social enterprise recovery fund so that we can assist social enterprises and the poor they serve recover effectively. Lastly, in terms of resource mobilization, we're wanting to sustain and broaden the platform beyond July 2021. That is when we end the program of GRAISEA. No? And we're hoping that beyond that, we will be able to develop partnerships that will help us sustain the platform in ASEAN and beyond. So my last slide is about, my last 2 slides is about the We Live Food stakeholders. I'd just like to introduce and recognize that the organizing committee for this platform is actually co-led by us with Bina Swadaya and the CCIP. That's why you see Juan here also. And our key stakeholders include Dompet Duafa in Indonesia, Bote Central in the Philippines, Alter Trade, Negros Organic Fair Trade Association, Gandang Kalikasan, the Philippine Business for Social Progress, all in the Philippines, GreenNet in Thailand, Change Fusion also in Thailand, Dan Foundation in India, and of course, our partner Oxfam. And in 1 year's time, last slide please, we're hoping that we would transform this organizing committee into a multi-stakeholder conveners group, no? Where we will not only have social enterprises as well as producers, organizations from among women and men, to also include national government agencies, multilateral agencies, corporate agribusiness, SMEs, civil society, and social investors. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to working with you. We're launching this platform and are hopeful that we will be successful in bringing this to the cross-sectoral collaboration towards inclusive recovery and building back better in a substantive way in agricultural value chains. Thank you very much. Juan?
Wow. Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. I know that there's a lot of work that Lisa and the college from the Asia has put together, to transform and also to develop from the very initial project GRAISEA and bench on some initiative and become a multi-stakeholder platform as today. So with an effort to connect and synthesize on the resource and evolving commitment from different stakeholders in the transformation of women and men small scale producer in agricultural value chains. So today we are here to launch the multi-stakeholder platform on women empowerment, livelihood, and food in agricultural value chains. We urge all the people can use the resource in the web page for more information on the multi-stakeholders platform on We Live Food as the benchmark for transformational partnership and women economic empowerment in agricultural value chains. So now may I invite the ISEA team to present, some the information on the web page, so we can and the link as well, so we can continue to engage and to contribute as well to use the resource from the web page for our work. Over to ISEA.
Thank you, Juan. I would like to advise colleagues in the call that to support the multi-stakeholder platform on We Live Food, we are also launching a web page inside the ISEA website, and resources are available for you to scan through. We are thankful for the support of Oxfam and the Swedish Embassy in Bangkok in the development of this web page and ISEA's new look in the new website. Thank you very much. Over to you. Back to you, Juan. Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So I guess that you got all the information you needed and the link of the webpage, so we can continue to explore more later, right? Thank you very much, Gomer. Okay, so we that listens to three speakers. At the beginning, we listen to the Vice and Vitun and Lisa. The Vice and Vitun present two case studies to showcase how the agriculture value chain, how we can promote and transform the role of women and men, and to benefit more people in the agriculture value chains business. And we also listen to Lisa on how we can collaborate and strengthen our support in that area. So now I would like to invite the three reactors to have a compliment and also to put the thought on this topic as well. The first reactor, the Dr. Sita Sumrit. Sita is currently the head of poverty eradication and gender division and assistant director of the Human Development Directorate at the ASEAN Secretariat based in Jakarta, Indonesia. So prior to joining ASEAN Secretariat, she was the chief of Women and Children Empowerment Program at the Thailand Institute of Justice. She has worked on development issues in Southeast Asia at Oxfam, the UN, and as well as the academic institution. She received her PhD and then the MP from University of Cambridge and master degree from London School of Economics and from Sciences Po France. So now, Dr. Rita Sita, okay, could you please give the thought and feedback to the section? Thank you, Sita. I can't hear you.
Please unmute.
Okay, I just unmute the microphone. Sorry, I would just make a very quick, brief reaction to all the very interesting presentations and all the inspiring stories from the speakers. My intervention will be more on the ASEAN, especially the policy level and framework. I hope it will be of good contribution to this conversation. I think from all the speakers, we understand, of course, the importance of women's economic empowerment, especially in the context of agriculture and rural sector. From the ASEAN side, women's economic empowerment is very high on the agenda. It's led by the ASEAN Committee on Women. And that will lead to my second point that because it's led by only one sector, there is still a need. And I think all the speakers have already alluded to that for a more cross-sectoral, multi-stakeholders approach. ASEAN is working on mainstreaming women's economic empowerment through all the areas, political area, economic area, and socio-cultural area. The encouraging news is that for our ASEAN sector working on agriculture and forestry, as well as on rural development and poverty eradication, have embraced the initiatives to mainstream gender into their work. It's still quite nascent, if I can say it candidly, but it's already there. There has been a development of the guidelines, gender mainstreaming guideline, because to be fair, not all the actors in the rural sector or in the social enterprise sector, even if they want to do gender or to promote women's economic empowerment, not all of them know how to do it. And I think it's important for ASEAN to lay down the not only policy framework, but the guidelines on so how we can do this and what the impact will look like. So we are on track to do that, engaging with different actors, including the civil society organizations and rural people's organization. So that's the point number one. So the ASEAN Committee on Women is reaching out to a number of actors to ensure that these efforts will finally yield fruits. And in the context of COVID-19, I think, and this is not just to press ASEAN, but I think we've moved fast enough, not only at the ASEAN level, but the national level to address the impacts of COVID-19 on the rural and agriculture sector. At the high level commitment level, all the ministers working on agriculture and forestry held a special meeting to discuss on how ASEAN and their member states can ensure the continuity of food supply chain and food security. And I think that's very pertinent to the discussion that we are having now. But that is more on the productivity side. But COVID-19 goes beyond affecting the food supply chain and the rural sector and the rural people as producers. It also affects them as people. And I think for women's economic empowerment, the ASEAN sector working on rural development and social welfare. And I'm naming a number of sectors because they are working together, even if they are separate entities. They also address the importance to protect them. So not just to enable them to produce all the time, because they might be affected from COVID-19 in a different way. I think the Kun Vitun has also mentioned on the aging population in the rural sector. So ASEAN has also addressed different needs of people living in the rural sector, especially women, older women, and youth. And that is for the purpose of, apart from mitigating the impacts on them by COVID-19 pandemic, social, economic, prepare them. And I think resilience is the key theme that all the speakers have addressed, but to prepare them to continue with the human capital development in the rural sector so that they can contribute more effectively through the development of social enterprise in the rural sector. I think my last point, to be very quick, because there are other reactors as well, is of course women's empowerment, the reinvigoration of the rural sectors, and most importantly, I think infrastructure and investment is something that ASEAN has been working on and is looking into in the context of COVID-19. I think Kun Vitun has mentioned also that they are traveling by boat and all this. So the connectivity sector of ASEAN is looking into sustainable infrastructure as part of the poverty eradication and rural development. So we are addressing all this, but of course, we cannot do it as ASEAN, as the regional organization, but we need the help of the member states and the real people, which I think the real people are here in this forum, and it's very encouraging to see. And of course, working with, we are starting to working with Oxfam, but on the unpaid care work, which of course affects women also in the rural area. They're going to the field, trying to ensure that food security continue, and then they go back home, and then the unpaid and domestic care work hasn't been systematically addressed, for example. So that's just a quick intervention from my end. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Sita. You had mentioned about the three things. Yes, that the number one is that we need to promote for the cross-sectoral integration and gender mainstreaming in the work that we are doing. And is the number two, when we assess the impact of the COVID-19 in agricultural sector, it's not only important to ensure the food security, but also equally important to protect the vulnerable population, including the women, youth, and elderly people also in that context. And also that the number 3, that the point that you made, Sita, is about how to start, to take more care about to sustain our infrastructure, to ensuring that our work in the field is comprehensively addressed by the different stakeholders. Thank you very much, Sita, for the reaction. So may I introduce the next reactor? This is Erin Sweeney. She is the manager of the Sustainable Business and Investment Manager at GRAISEA, a multi-stakeholder partnership platform that catalyzes action on inclusive agricultural development in Southeast Asia. So, Erin, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and many thanks to ISEA for the opportunity to be here today and speak to all of you. As the moderator just shared, GRAISEA is a multi-stakeholder platform, so we're always interested in conversations about multi-stakeholder and cross-sectoral collaboration, and it was great to hear all 3 speakers really highlight that in the session today. I just want to add that GRAISEA has been working for the last 5 years to improve smallholder farmer livelihoods at the national and local level. So we are a regional network, but have national offices that implement these projects together with our partners, 50% of whom are from the private sector, 25% from CSOs and NGOs, and the remainder from the public sector. So we're very excited to see how we can support these efforts through those existing partnerships of about 520 members in the region. I just wanted to actually also focus on 3 main points that I heard come up from the speakers and that we also see reflected in the work that GRAISEA is currently doing. So the first was really around local and regional food systems promotion. So Bai from both Central and the Coffee Alliance spoke about connecting farmers directly to consumers to build back better and to promote fairer wages for farmers. And what we're seeing at the regional level is that there is a real opportunity for national governments to actually step forward with schemes that can promote and support consumers to look for local food as a strategy to build back better, as they realize that consuming local food will also help promote the local economic growth in those countries. So we're very much interested to see those kinds of movements happening, particularly led by government. Vitun from GreenNet spoke about young farmers and climate change mitigation, and there were some comments I saw in the chat box around young farmers as well. Again, this is an issue that GRAISEA spends a lot of time thinking about because we do see growth in the number of young farmers that are coming up around the region, but we see that those young farmers want to farm differently. They want access to digital technologies and to ag tech solutions, or even to develop those solutions themselves. So then again, we see a need for the private sector to step in and start supporting those kinds of solutions and supporting young farmers to adopt technologies, but also for the government to ensure that the infrastructure and investment, as Sita just pointed out, exists so that, for example, rural farmers can actually access broadband internet and use the kinds of solutions that are being promoted around the region really at this point. And I just wanted to add that the focus on organic standards and certifications, GAP and HACCP, we are seeing an increasing demand from our private sector members to look for suppliers that are complying with these kinds of certifications and standards. So we see that as a great way forward in the COVID-19 recovery. And then lastly, Lisa spoke about supporting streamlined impact measurement. And again, our private sector partners are asking us quite regularly for the kinds of measurement and standards that they can use that are relevant to ASEAN, and that really combine this idea of the partnerships that they're trying to form with NGOs, with farmer organizations, with government. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to try to scale up these benchmarks, whether that be by embedding them into a set of ASEAN guidelines, or holding as many learning events and opportunities for the private sector to actually understand how those benchmarks apply to them and what they can do with the information that they gain from these scorecards, how they can promote their own work on women's economic empowerment, how they can strengthen their partnerships. And these are things that the private sector very regularly is asking us about. So thrilled to see that. And then I'd just like to point out one more quick thing in my remaining minute, which is that GRAISEA hosted a COVID-19 roundtable on ASEAN food systems back in May. And from that roundtable of about 100 partners, we formed 4 different working groups. And interestingly, they focus on topics that have been brought up here today. And we will be putting out a report in the next month about the findings of these working groups. And these working groups have made recommendations specifically for the ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN member states to consider. So they focused on rural logistics, which we've heard mentioned several times today, digital marketing platforms, particularly for women to be able to access e-commerce, mobile money and digital financial services to make payment structures easier and more transparent, and then also, of course, the digital enabling and policy environment. And that comes back to the need to focus on infrastructure and investment in rural areas. So thrilled to be here today and have the opportunity to share all of this with you. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it back to the moderator.
Yeah, wow. Thank you very much, Erin. I'd love to see you nicely, you know, that you can see the how the WEE benchmark, you know, so our benchmark scorecard can apply in improving and, you know, helping the private sector to measure and to come up with a new initiative to promote, you know, in this sector. Such a wonderful. That also one of the major objective of this it is a plenary discussion as well. Thank you very much for bringing it into the reaction. Okay, so because given the time, so I have to move to the next reactor. You know, we saved the best for the last. Okay, so welcome to Rosalie Nicole. She is from Fiji. She is a Fijian national with master in international law and politics, and currently is the regional director for Oxfam as a Pacific. The regional director for Pacific to provide strategic direction and coordination for Oxfam program, advocacy, and humanitarian work in the Pacific. Welcome to Nicole, and we are really looking forward to hear the feedback from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you as well to the organizers. Thank you, Lisa, for this invitation for me to join you this evening. It's about 6 p.m. here in Fiji. Oh no, it's all good. I had the good fortune of living in the Philippines for almost 7 years, so it's really lovely to be in touch with everybody. So I have a slide that I want to, I'll share that shortly, that's one. But I prepared the slide because I was asked to respond to, be a reactor to Lisa's presentation. And the other reason, the third reason why I prepared the slide is around the recognition that now we want to look at the scale, you know, how to scale the framework for the benchmark for transformative partnership when it comes to women's economic empowerment and agriculture value chain. So in that light, I thought, you know, the reflections and the response from you know, from me this afternoon is around, you know, providing the context in which we will engage with the framework. So I will, sorry, put on my glasses and then I'll share my screen. And how do I do a slideshow? Cool. All right. So, okay, because impact matters, I've called it that, you know, and for me, I just want to say congratulations again to, you know, for this amazing resource that we have in our hands today. I'm really excited, you know, I'm just listening to the previous speakers. You know, this platform provides a space for peer-to-peer learning and hearing from each other, you know, and one of the things that we hear quite often from our partners is that we never get the opportunity to learn things in real time. Usually we get it afterwards, and then we miss asking the question, why did you do that? What were you thinking? You know, what was the context? So for me, you know, the platform that we launched is exciting on that. It is really exciting just in terms of that potential for South-South collaboration and just getting people to talk to one another. Before I go on to just the next slide, I just wanted to say again how, just in that context of COVID and why the benchmarking transformative, I hope I've said that right, transformative partnership is timely, is just looking at, during COVID, post-COVID, how we saw, how it exposed the failure of the systems that we have, how it fleshed out the inequality and the inequities that exist within countries and also between countries. It showed how systems were stressed and stretched and how they're siloed. Also, on the other note, we got to see how the earth got to breathe, got to recover, and it was an indictment of the kind of economic models that we have. But what was interesting is in the region is that many of us went back to planting, when we lost our jobs. The Pacific is known for the sun and sea, so a lot of our economies are built on tourism, and which is such an irony given that, for us, agriculture, both fishing and land, are key resources that we have. So most of us lost our jobs and we went back to the land. So, so why is the benchmark transformative partnership, the women's economic empowerment, agriculture value chain, why this matters? For me, just unpacking, it brings in a systems thinking to addressing systemic inequality. Yeah? The framework behind the benchmarking, when we talked, it looks at, it allows for that inclusive recovery and building back better. That's, that framework sets out, this is what we want to achieve. The policies, the guidelines for practice, it's not just, it provides an enabling environment. The core thing there is around behaviors. What kind of behaviors do we want to see that enables different people to come together? And then the scorecards. The scorecards is always understood as a social accountability tool, but at the same time, it is an affirmative action tool. And then just the word transformative. For me, transformative says business as usual is not good enough. It's about really calling out. When we say transformative, we're talking about let's question privileges and power. Then partnerships. The word partnerships, for me, says quite clearly, this is about solidarity. This is about institutions, because it's institutions that systems come through, that policies come through. When we talk about multi-stakeholder partnerships, we've got to recognize what the different players, where they, the different players and own, the ability to, the power of that decision making. So the last part is the agricultural value chain. And this, just to link it back, agriculture, it's not just land, it's sea. And this is where I'm going to talk to why it matters for the Pacific. And when we look at the scalability of the framework, in the Pacific, and this slide shows, on the globe, it shows a few key factors, just to provide a context of why I'm saying the scalability is important at this particular juncture. One is that climate change matters, and it is at the forefront of everything that we do in this region, and of course for the rest of the world. The IPCC report that came out in 2018 was really clear that we've got to limit global warming at 1.5. Other, statistics in the Pacific, which I know is across Asia as well, 1 out of 4 live below the poverty line. 7.7, just 8% of women in the Pacific are in parliament. And when you've got the global average of 23%, it is really dire. And then you've got that stat around the budgets, how much governments put into their budgets, but also the remoteness, just in terms of the large ocean space. And I want to, just from an economies of scale to run a business, our populations are small. our population size is as small as 2,000 people, and the largest country is 7 million. Total number of Pacific Islanders in this region, and I've purposefully set in our boardroom with the background is the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean covers 70% of the world, when you look at Earth, yeah, 70%. And let me move to this particular slide. So this is a slide of this is the Pacific Ocean. So as the Pacific Islanders, we are custodians of we see the ocean as not just a body of water, but we also see it as we are custodians of this of the Pacific Ocean. With 7 million, like I said already, the largest country is Papua New Guinea, and that's 7 million. The closest is Fiji, which is less than 1 million. Tuvalu, if you can see Tuvalu, it's got 10,000 people. Yeah, so that's the size of. So when you have to run a business, social enterprise, this is the kind of tensions and challenges that we have. But at the same time, what's really exciting about this region and what always makes me really happy when I talk about the Pacific is that when it's our relationship with this body of water and around. So just for some context, Fiji, our landmass is around 18,000 square kilometers. The sea around it is 1.2 million square kilometers. Okay. Kiribati, and I don't know if you can see Kiribati, it's towards if you're looking at your screen, it's towards the right, top right. Now Kiribati, it's an atoll and its landmass is only 800 square kilometers, 800, right? But its sea, its EEZ is around 3 million square kilometers, 3 million. Now to contextualize that, Indonesia landmass, 1.2 million square kilometers, meaning the whole of Indonesia can fit inside Kiribati as a country. The Philippines landmass, 300,000 square kilometers. Again, I'm just talking here about landmass, but this is to give you a sense of the spread of what we, in terms of that custodianship. Now, why is this? This is a quick run through to say why is this framework important at this time? In the last 5 years, there's been a lot of energy and interest in the blue economy. We've had the green economy, now it's around the blue economy, and you can see all the different industries that's in there. The next slide, now again, this shows the interest in the Pacific Ocean. And these are all the various kinds of, in terms of the international interest in the Pacific. So from Indonesia, you've got the elevation foreign policy in terms of the foreign policy engaging with the Pacific. From China, you've got the Belt and Road work. From Japan, it's got free and open. So this is about how to engage with the region. And of course, New Zealand is reset and Australia is step up. Okay, that was to give you all context. And now I'm going to come back to the title of the slide, intention, the intention of providing the platform, of having benchmarking. Really, at the end of the day, it must lead to impact. What is, the system, and it must lead to an impact. And, from a Pacific perspective, the benchmarking gives us the actual tools to be able to work with different partners. But I wanted to foreground that when I said that Pacific Islanders are custodians of the Pacific Ocean, for the different countries that we are from, each country enshrined into our national laws is that land, you can't separate land and ocean, and that natural resource is in Pacific Islanders' hands. We hold it in stewardship for the next generation. It's got this element of ownership to it. And these are the conversations that we've been having inside Oxfam, is that this is, you know, agriculture, land and sea is not just a productive resource. You've got to go one step back and ask, who are the owners of the land? And, you know, looking at indigenous peoples. And why this becomes an important framework is that when we're talking about women's empowerment in the Pacific, you cannot separate the fact that she is an indigenous woman and she's the holder of, you know, she owns land, she owns sea area, but it's not hers to own, to have. It is for the future generations. And this is where the benchmarking becomes very important around the notion of sustainability. The other component that's important here is around partnerships. We have existing partnerships, you know, in terms of you've got Women in Fisheries Network, you've got the locally marine managed areas, you've got all the different resource agencies. And yet the ways of coming together of saying it's not just about managing the resource. We know that the Pacific receives, you know, out of the 3.6 billion per annum that we earn from our fisheries, only 2 million go out of the Pacific. So in terms of being able to you know, so for us, the conversation around social enterprise cannot be separated from the fact that this resource is not to be plundered, extracted, but it needs to ensure that it provides that sovereignty, independence aspect. When we talk about women's economic empowerment, it has to be tied to the fact that in the Pacific, 7.7 of women only make it, you know, that we make up in parliament. That's the figure that has to shift. So for us, the benchmark becomes tools, scorecards to get towards change parliament. Let's look at, if this is the amount of money that we make from the fisheries resource, well, how come only 1% goes into our budget? Those are the kinds of conversations that's important here. So I will stop here. You know, the key thing I wanted to bring in is to talk about that when we are running social enterprises, you know, from a Pacific perspective, what will bring in the actual, you know, in terms of ensuring that it becomes practice, that it is not just about, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that in a minimalist way. What I'm trying to say here is that these are important tools to hold government accountable in terms of putting in systems that shift, you know, systems and policies and institutions that shifts behavior, but is accountable back to those, you know, to future generations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the Rachel, Nicole, for the very intensive and, you know, comprehensive presentation. And I received a lot of comment from audience that we are all very happy to see that you brought up the issue of indigenous people in that conversation. Yeah, so that's wonderful to see, because you know, the indigenous people, we keep on the license knowledge and also the skill, and now how we can, you know, can protect that, and also to develop, and also to transfer to another generation as well. Okay, so yeah, because given the time constraint, now we already like 20 minutes behind the schedules. I know that there are a lot of questions to Nicole and to others. Speaker, reactor in this session as well. I hope that you will stay with us and come back to us after the lunchtime. And well, after lunch, we will have a plenary session 3. And after plenary session, we have another supplementary session on WEE, and we will have more time to discuss about the benchmark and about the, all the issue related to women economic empowerment. Yeah, thank you very much for our 3 reactors and the speaker for this plenary session.